Ollie, I want to start with you. The question over this weekend was when, if, and what does it look like are we going to get the ground invasion? The Israeli forces have been mustering for a while now. We've been anticipating that we would see it. We haven't seen it yet. Is the nature of what we should expect changing?
I think so, Guy. I think that the sort of genesis of this was the if was the first question, then it became the what, and the when rather, and now it's the what. And I think that the Israelis have been sort of laying the groundwork a little bit, the IDF, saying that basically forget what you think you know about what you assume this invasion is going to look like, this incursion is going to look like. You know, I think there are a lot of people who assumed it was just going to be a kind of scorched earth, then going into Gaza, going door to door, there could be an occupation. And I think that the Israelis have wanted to really leave a lot of the options on the table, particularly when you add the complexity of hostages, you add the complexity of international, it may be not fair to say pressure, because the U.S., the biggest sort of supporter of Israel, has been very, very careful about what it says. But Anthony Blinken said it very first, and during the first week of this whole event, the how of how Israel goes about this is critically important, particularly if, you know, according to Gazan authorities, we're talking about more than 5,000 people that have been killed since the beginning of this already.
So, Nick, bring that perspective in. What has the U.S.'s role over the last 48 hours been in trying to shape what the next leg of the conflict looks like?
Well, I think, you know, early on you basically heard from Israeli officials that they were going to go in no matter what, disregarding the fact that Hamas has about 200 hostages somewhere in the Gaza Strip. And now I think what you're seeing, given that you had 2 Americans released on Friday, there has been some tentative hope that you could have negotiations through Qatar to free some more of those hostages. So you have the U.S. and the EU and others basically saying, listen, let's put the brakes on this, or, you know, reshape what the ground invasion might look like so that we can focus on getting those hostages out. You have seen an uptick in airstrikes again, so still very much Israel determined to go in at some point, but it does appear that there's a great deal of sort of back-channel diplomacy happening right now to ask Israel to at least delay and maybe, as we're saying, reshape the what the ground invasion looks like to go for those hostages.
Ollie, do we know how many people are still at the northern end of the Strip and how many people have gone south, how occupied that area is now? You talked about the level of casualties just a moment ago. People are moving south, have moved south. Is that process continuing? Is the northern end of the Gaza Strip continuing to empty out?
So I think it's very difficult to get accurate figures on this. I mean, I've seen, you know, between 600,000 and 700,000 that have moved down. Again, you have other people reporting even larger numbers of how many people have been displaced. I think it's very hard to tell. And again, amid that, the reports that Hamas is preventing people also from moving. But certainly, you know, they've begun to set up some camps in the southern bit. And the southern bit, Guy, is where the aid is coming through. And we understand, again, it's very hard to know what's going on at the Rafah border crossing. There is Egyptian media reporting now, sort of in the last couple hours, that there is another convoy of aid that is moving in. But again, this is sort of aid that we're talking about a drop in the ocean. You know, 20 trucks on Saturday. The UN is really looking for more like 100 trucks a day in order for there to be meaningful progress. And there were a lot of sticking points, fuel being one of them, particularly on the Israeli side.
Hey, Nick, I'm curious as to talk about, I was reading a lot over the weekend about U.S. forces in the Middle East in general coming under some problems. And I'm just wondering how the U.S. is being perceived within the Middle East and what the repercussions of that may be.
Well, so you have a situation where the U.S. is essentially flowing a great deal of military assets into the region, so putting troops on ready, also sending more fighter jets to aircraft carrier groups. So on the one hand, you know, it's a situation where there's going to naturally be, you would think, a stepped-up pace of activity just because there are more troops in the region, but that has coincided with what U.S. officials say is a really disturbing trend, which is more drone attacks against U.S. bases in Syria and Iraq. We're getting reports now that there was another one this morning at about 3 a.m. So while there have not been severe casualties, you are seeing that, and that's something that Secretary of State Blinken voiced over the weekend, a concern that there is going to be a further escalation against U.S. forces.
Nick, are we aware, have we seen, has it been observed that there is a change in the nature of the Ukrainian conflict as a result of what is happening in Israel? How do these two wars, conflicts interact with each other?
Well, the big thing is artillery ammunition, so 155 millimeter shells. Essentially, there's in high demand by both sides, and we do have some indications that the U.S. has diverted some artillery shells to Israel. But really, the bigger question is one of focus. You know, Ukraine has really sought to keep international attention focused on its plight and the pushback against Russia, mostly for aid and obviously military hardware, and if you don't have that support, then they argue that their position against Russia is weakened both on the battlefield and in the halls of the UN and other places. So Israel has really shifted that focus away from Ukraine, and that's something that they're trying desperately to get back.
Oliver, what's going to be the key thing for us to watch over the next 24 hours? Is it still going to be the ability to get aid in? What are the key metrics on the ground that you're focusing on?
Yeah, I think that aid is certainly going to be one of them. The other one, of course, is the escalation risk. And where precisely do you look for that? You look north, you look at the border with Lebanon, where, despite the fact that the main theater of war is still in Gaza and where there has been an absolute pummeling over this weekend, again, from the aerial forces of Israel, more and more you see that there is more engagement going on in south of Lebanon. And the Israelis are continuously evacuating more and more and more people that are near the border. I mean, just anecdotally, for me, I've been, staying in this hotel for about 2 weeks. At first, I met a number of people that were evacuated from the south. Now, more and more, it's people that are being evacuated from the north of Israel as the sort of tensions rise there.